So we're going to call this meeting of the Santa Cruz Mid-County Groundwater Agency to order. Will you please have the roll call?
Bruce Jaffe.
Present.
Tom McHugh.
Here.
John Bennett.
Here.
Robert Marani.
Here.
Zach Friend. John Leopold. Cynthia Matthews. Here. David Baskin.
Present.
Kurt Abramson.
Present.
Jim Kerr.
Here.
John Kennedy.
Okay.
Any alternates present?
John Rector, representing the County of Santa Cruz.
Okay, and we may have another alternate who will be here if it.
Okay. So at this point, we do have a quorum. And I'm going to take this opportunity to welcome everybody. And thank you all for coming. We have a lot of people here tonight. We appreciate that. In terms of the way this meeting is going to be conducted for public comments, there's a brief section I wanted to read to everybody about how the meeting is going to go, so that we can all be in the same understanding. Regarding non-agenda items, at the outset of the meeting, which is right now, there's a time set aside for public comment. Members of the public are able to comment on any item which is not on the agenda, as long as it's related to the subject matter of the MGA. Each speaker is limited to a single presentation of up to 3 minutes, and that time can be extended at my discretion. Speakers need to address the entire board and step forward when they're allowed to and state their name and make any comments you want. As far as items on the agenda goes, the same procedure applies. The public will have every opportunity to address the board regarding all items which are agenda items. And then at the conclusion of the meeting, they'll have the opportunity to mention any items which also need to be presented for a future agenda. And that way, we can avoid a lot of discussion during the presentation of agenda items between the board and the public if you concentrate the time during that public comment period. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to move to item 4, presentation by Hydrometrics Water Resources on defining sustainability. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I jumped over. Public comments. After that, public comments.
It's optional to state your name. If you're a member of the public, that is optional. But just if you want your name noted, please do it.
If you want to be anonymous, you can be anonymous. So if anybody would like to make a public comment now, you're welcome. Becky.
Thank you. My name is Becky Steinbruner. I'm a resident of Aptos and customer of Pure Source Water Company. I also am working with a group of citizens called Water for Santa Cruz, and it is a group of very well-informed, educated citizens from varied backgrounds. And we have put together a water forum next Monday night at the Aptos Library. That will be at 7 o'clock. And we have invited a number of agencies. Some, not all are coming, but some people are. And the goal of this forum is to really open up a public discussion, to allow people to ask questions publicly and really have a dialogue, which we're not allowed to do at these kinds of meetings. And we really feel that that is needed in this community throughout the county to really help educate people about alternative supplies and ways that we can all work together to solve the water problem that our region is in. It's going to take cooperation and mutual respect, and that's our goal. So I have some flyers over on the table, and again, that's next Monday night at the Aptos Library from 7 to 9 p.m., and we welcome everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak?
Good evening, Brian Lockwood, the Colorado Valley Water Management Agency. I just wanted to come and say hello and provide a brief report. Our board of directors had a meeting last night, and we achieved a significant milestone in the implementation of our basin management plan, which is our plan that we've submitted as an alternative to a groundwater sustainability plan under SGMA, and we've been implementing over the last couple of decades to bring supplemental water supplies to the valley to stop groundwater overdraft, stop seawater intrusion and achieve balanced basin. And our meeting last night, the board of directors provided guidance to staff to move forward and submit a water right application to take up to 3,000 acre-feet of water from College Lake, which is an intermittent lake by the College Lake Fairground, or the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds. It's drained every year, and the water flows out to Monterey Bay. So this particular project would look to take that water, send it via pipeline to our existing distribution system, so it could be used as an alternative to groundwater pumping. And they also directed staff to develop and then issue the notice of preparation for the environmental impact report, which we intend to issue the end of November and have sequence scoping meetings probably the second week or so of December. And so we encourage your participation in our process and hope that you review the materials when they come out, provide any feedback that you think is useful. Of course, our board meetings are all open to the public. We encourage everybody to attend, and we look forward to increased collaboration with this group being that with neighboring basins. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody else in the public like to address the board at this time? Okay.
Chair, I just want to, I'm wondering if you would consider moving the presentation towards the end of the meeting and put it in towards the items, general business items. I think most of the public is here for the general business as well. I don't know if other members will. My thought was if the meeting is going long, the presentation can be scaled if necessary.
I asked Derek to do this presentation. I think I mentioned this presentation at the last meeting that we had at one of the working committee meetings, and I asked him to put about 30-minute time slots for presentation and some questions. So, there may be a little bit of time in there that could be reduced depending on if there aren't very questions. But I think it's really important, and I thought it was, whether we do it now or later, I think it's really important information for the board to have as a framework for how we're going to approach solving this problem. So that's.
I agree, it's important information. I'm just thinking we're all interject at this point and taking on the business at this point.
Let me ask Derek.
Yeah.
How long will your presentation be?
It is slated for 30 minutes. I could cut it down a little if you want to, but at the pleasure of the board is to do it at the end of the meeting. I'm willing to do that also. Yeah.
What's the pleasure of the board? Anybody else?
Mine is now.
Mine is now as well. Okay, so it seems like it's now.
So
Well,
we have handouts
thank
for
you.
the public. And anyone else like a handout of this presentation?
Did you provide it for the board members?
Whoever would like one, just raise your hand and walk around. And you might have to share a little bit, but I will pass on what we have, so.
Joey, everybody, a couple for this over here.
Yep.
Okay.
A little too dark.
Turn off lights.
Yes, of course. No, they will be.
They will be.
Part of the
Okay,
review.
great, thank you. So I will cut this one a little shorter. And that's fine, because this is just an introductory talk to sustainable management criteria and how you define sustainability. This is part of probably a series of talks to get everybody up to speed on what sustainable management criteria are, why they're important, and what sort of process we're going through. The actual understanding of this will probably take a few talks or a few meetings to go through. So it'll be no problem cutting this one a little short. We'll get through the introduction parts and get everybody familiar with where we're going. So the purpose, how we define sustainability. Sustainable management criteria are the very way you define sustainability under Sigma. Remember, sustainability gets to be defined locally. That's one of the great things about this law. You get to decide for yourself what success looks like, and then you get to success. Basically, you define your own measurement of success, which is a great thing. So I'm going to talk mainly, I'm going to talk about the definitions and how the concepts interrelate. At the end of this, I have some slides, sort of some process slides, as to what sort of steps you're going to go through. That's the part I'm going to go through very quickly, and we will do at a later talk. Great. So why is this important? As I say, these are the very definition of sustainability. Every basin has to define for themselves what success is and what sustainability is. This is one of the parts that DWR considers the most, one of the most, if not the most important section of a GSP there. You really don't have a lot of leeway to say, we'll define sustainability later. DWR is going to insist that you have quantitative targets that you're moving towards in this plan, and this is where you set those targets. That's one of the key things. Your definition of sustainability has to be quantitative. It can't just be a general description. It has to reflect the needs of local users. You have to say, our basin is going to look a certain way because the local users want it to look a certain way, or at least you have to acknowledge what the local users want. And you have to define what undesirable is. That's a little trickier than it sounds right now because it's defined in the legislation in a very distinct way. So if you think it's undesirable just to have groundwater, that's not good enough. It has to be quantitatively defined. Like I say, it's one of the core activities in GSP development, and DWR considers it probably one of the most important chapters in your plan. So, one thing I want to do at the beginning to get everybody thinking in the right way is to get everybody to stop thinking about adjudications. If you've been in the water business a little while, you know that a lot of groundwater basins are managed under court adjudications. And there is a system that's been set up for how those adjudications are designed and how they work. And this system under Sigma is very different. So I'm going to first remind you how adjudications look, and then I'm going to tell you to forget everything about it. Because if adjudications are in the back of your mind, you're never going to quite get the concept of sustainable management criteria. So this is how adjudications are set up. Usually the court defines what's called a safe yield. The safe yield is the court's estimate of how much water can be pumped out of a basin without having undesirable results. So usually the court comes up with a number, some number of acre feet, and they say that is the safe yield of the basin. Then the court divides up that safe yield among all the pumpers, so everybody in the basin gets to pump a portion of it, and as long as you're pumping below that safe yield, you're in good shape. That's the way adjudications work. Sustainability under adjudications is based on the amount you pump. If you pump within your safe yield, you're doing fine. Forget about all that now, okay? That's what you don't want to be thinking about, because the way it's set up in Sigma is very different. Sigma is set up like this. There are things called undesirable results. Those are quantitative measurements in the basin. They're measurements of water levels. They're measurements of the amount of groundwater in storage. They're the measurements of where any seawater intrusion is occurring. They're all quantitative measurements. As a group, you get to say what is the quantitative undesirable result. You get to say this is what we don't want to see. If you manage your basin to avoid those undesirable results, by definition, you are pumping within your sustainable yield. It's not an amount of pumping. It's just the avoiding undesirable results. By definition, you'll be within your sustainable yield, you will be managing your groundwater sustainably, and you'll be meeting your sustainability goal. All three of those things have to happen under Sigma. You have to pump this way. You have to pump within your sustainable yield, manage sustainably, and meet a sustainability goal. That happens by definition as long as you don't have undesirable results. So, sustainability in Sigma is based on the condition of the aquifer, not how much you pump. And that's the fundamental difference. So this is the way you want to be thinking from now on. This is where defining the undesirable results is where the sustainable management criteria come in. So that's why these are so important. As long as you define your sustainable management criteria correctly and avoid undesirable results, everything will follow naturally. That's why this is important. Next. That's just what I said right there. He was defining what's undesirable. So, some terms. Now I'm going to start throwing out some terms, some definitions, and these are going to be the definitions that make up sustainable management criteria. If I lose anybody, please raise your hand. Be happy to answer any questions about it. I'm going to go over what the terms are in sustainable management criteria and how they interrelate. There you go. First term, minimum thresholds. These are numeric values that you don't want to fall below, generally. This is the line where you say bad things happen beyond this line. That's a minimum threshold. There's going to be minimum thresholds for a lot of things. The easiest one to think about is groundwater levels. So if you think about a well that's got a water level in it, there's a water level that you never want to go below. And that's your minimum threshold. That's your line in the sand saying that's where we want to avoid there. So that's the bad thing. Measurable objectives are also quantitative. They're also a thing you're going to measure. And if water levels is what you're talking about, measurable objectives will also be a water level. You have to measure your minimum thresholds and your measurable objectives at the same set of wells. You get one set of, you actually get many sets of wells. That's a whole talk for a later discussion. The measurable objectives are set above the minimum threshold, and that's what you're shooting for. That's what you want to manage towards. Now the trick here is, this is a line that you never want to go below. If you're going to shoot for this, you want it high enough that it gives you protection above your minimum threshold. There's a buffer, a protection there. You don't want it so high, though, that you'll never get there. You don't want it so high that you can't achieve that, because that's what you're shooting for. And if you end up low, DWR is going to ask you, why aren't you meeting your measurable objectives? So finding just that right buffer zone is going to be the key. So you're safe, but you're something that's achievable. Both minimum thresholds and measurable objectives, this is the don't go there, this is what you're shooting for, they both have to be quantitative. Minimum thresholds, like I said, they're set at every representative monitoring point is the phrase that you'll see in the legislation. When you see representative monitoring point, think of a well for today. In a month, I'll have you think of a lot of other things, okay? Stream gauges, etc., etc., etc. For right now, to keep it easy, a representative monitoring point is a well. And you have to set a minimum threshold. It doesn't have to be the same one, but it has to be a threshold at every well. Every well that's in the monitoring system. There's a whole discussion there too. Measurable objectives, like I said, there's a safety factor on the minimum thresholds. They're set at the same set of wells. We're going to set things called interim milestones. Every 5 years, we have to go to DWR, show how we're doing with our undesirable results, and show that we're moving towards our measurable objectives. That's what you want to show. You want to show that you're avoiding your minimum thresholds every 5 years and you're moving towards your measurable objectives. If you're not, DWR is going to ask you why, and they're going to ask you if you're doing enough projects or are your projects not working the way you thought they were going to. So this is the graphic of how it's supposed to look. If this is groundwater level, and these are our historical groundwater levels, they've been just popping up and down. And this is today, the black line here. We will set somehow a minimum threshold for every well. And we will say we don't want to go below that line ever. We'll set a measurable objective above that. And we'll say that's what we're shooting for. Every 5 years, we have an interim milestone that we have to check on, 5, 10, 15 years. And at the end of 20 years, we are sustainable. That's the whole game. Did you get that? This is what we want to see. If we're doing great, this is what we want to see. Our water levels never go below the minimum thresholds, and they climb slowly towards the measurable objective, and 20 years out, we're there. That's the ultimate goal there. It's actually much more complicated than that, but for right now, that's exactly what we want to do. So this is the main concept of how these terms interrelate. Sustainability indicators. There are 6 of them. I was in a meeting today giving a similar talk, and I said, sustainability indicators, there are 6 of them. And I thought, okay, don't hire me for your modeling, I've got 8 fingers up. These are the 6 sustainability indicators. I've been talking so far about lowering groundwater levels. We have to make sure that we don't lower the groundwater levels too far. We, at the same time, have to address all of these. We have to set up some measurement minimum thresholds for all of them, measurable objectives for all of them, and undesirable results for all of them, basically. We have to make sure reduction in storage, we're measuring seawater intrusion, we're not degrading water quality. That's a bit more of a do no harm sustainability indicator. We don't have to clean up water quality, we just don't want to degrade it. We have to avoid land subsidence, and one of the most difficult ones, we have to avoid undesirable surface water depletions there. Undesirable surface water depletions due to groundwater pumping, effectively. So we have to set up minimum thresholds, measurable objectives for all 6 of those. Now comes the key definition, undesirable results. Because undesirable results is really in the legislation what you're avoiding. You actually aren't avoiding the minimum thresholds, you're avoiding undesirable results. You have to set up one undesirable result for each of those 6 sustainability indicators that I was talking about. There will be one undesirable result. And the undesirable result is a quantitative collection of minimum thresholds. And this is where it gets complicated now, okay? And I'm going to explain this in a couple examples so you understand where we're going. Again, we're going to use the simple examples right now. But remember, what you want to remember is undesirable results is the real thing you want to avoid. And only one of them is defined for the entire basin for each of the 6 sustainability indicators. So, I'm going to go through some examples, and when that gets confusing, let me know. First example, you would say an undesirable result occurs when 10% of your groundwater elevations drop below the minimum thresholds. So you're measuring groundwater levels at a lot of wells. If you've set a minimum threshold at each well, if 10% of those groundwater levels are below the associated minimum threshold, you would say that's undesirable. So that's one example there. And this is the actual thing that DWR is going to hold you to. Now you get to set the definition of your undesirable result, but it's got to be quantitative, and it has to take all your minimum thresholds and collect them together in some quantitative way. That's the trick there, okay? The other example is an undesirable result occurs when groundwater elevations at any monitoring point drop below the minimum threshold. Basically, you have said your minimum threshold is a hard line in the sand at every place simultaneously over time. This might be an example for seawater intrusion, for example. So you would say, look, we don't want just on average to stop seawater intrusion. We want to stop seawater intrusion at every place. And so this would be the type of example of an undesirable result for seawater intrusion, because this basically sets a hard line in the sand at every monitoring point. I think, where am I? Yeah, I think I'm going to give a couple more slides and then probably pass on how you actually go about start thinking about how all these things interrelate, because I want to take some questions, whether there's any about the definitions that we've gone through and how they're going to play out. What do we have here? Sustainability. What does it mean to be sustainable? You avoid undesirable results. You have set up 6 undesirable results now for the basin. You avoid them all simultaneously. You avoid all the 6 undesirable results. That's the definition of sustainability, okay? You don't have to meet measurable objectives. This is something that's still kind of in flux with DWR. We came to this conclusion with DWR, and they're checking with their legal team on this. But the way so far that we have interpreted the regulations, you actually don't have to meet your measurable objectives. There isn't a legal standard that you will have failed if you don't meet your measurable objectives. The legal standard for sustainability is based on the undesirable results. That's why I was saying earlier, well, you really want to go towards measurable objectives, and that's kind of a lie. But you still really want to, because if you're not heading towards them, DWR is still going to be concerned. So I point to say there still may be a point of contention out there. Right now, the insight is you don't have to meet measurable objectives. You still want to set them reasonably. So this is where I'm going to stop. How do we implement this? There is no one way to do this, but there is a whole iterative system of setting minimum thresholds, setting measurable objectives, deciding on undesirable results, trying to come up with projects that will get all your water levels up to measurable objectives. If the projects you have don't get you to your measurable objectives, there's a whole iteration. You can go back and say, did we set the minimum thresholds correctly or not? And you have to revisit those. Did we set our measurable objectives too high or too low? Or do we just not have enough projects in our toolbox? There's a long iterative process of trying to figure out what the minimum thresholds are, what the measurable objectives are, whether you define your undesirable result correctly or not. There's a whole iterative process there too. And so you'll probably cycle through this a couple times before you finally get to define sustainability the way you want it. It is potentially a confusing. Could you go to the last one, the last slide? Because there is a take-home. Crucial messages. So, plan on substantial iterative discussions. That's what it is. Discussions among the members, the public, discussions of what constitutes an undesirable result, whether your minimum thresholds adequately reflect the undesirable result, and whether your measurable objectives are reasonable. All these are probably going to be substantial and iterative discussions. The way we have set it up, one thing I didn't mention, there is a best management practice document that DWR will be putting out later this year on this item. The reason I feel confident is I'm the one who drafted the document for DWR, so I kind of know what's in the document right now. And the way the document's written, DWR views this as a very iterative, long process to come up with these sustainable management criteria. And I think that's it. So I think I will stop there. In the interest of time, take any questions.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah.
At this point, I think we would open it up for any questions from the public. Seeing none, members of the board. John?
Derek, is there a provision that allows you to use, for example, groundwater levels as a surrogate for some of the other things? So, for example, seawater intrusion.
Right.
Say, okay, for that seawater intrusion, we want to maintain the levels at this particular point, and then you manage to those groundwater levels, and that's how you're achieving your seawater intrusion.
Yes, there is. And something that John is referring to. I mentioned there are 6 sustainability indicators. Each one has its own measurement that comes with it. So for example, the sustainability indicator for groundwater levels, what you measure is groundwater levels. The sustainability indicator for seawater intrusion, what you measure is a chloride line. And it's up to you whether you want to make it 500 milligrams per liter or the 250 milligrams per liter chloride line, whatever you want to use. But that is, in DWR's mind, the indicator of seawater intrusion is the location of that line. It's not a measurement in the well. Now what John points out is there is a part of the regulations, actually of the legislation too, that says if you can demonstrate that groundwater levels are a good substitute for one of these other indicators, then you can substitute in groundwater levels. So if you can demonstrate that, as long as we know the relationship between groundwater levels and seawater intrusion, as long as you can show that relationship, then you can use groundwater levels as the measurement of seawater intrusion. You don't have to actually measure the seawater. Did that answer your question there, John?
Yeah.
Okay.
Many questions, but probably the most important one is, I very much get the point that this is an iterative process. So we have a timetable here. So to meet the timetable of a plan that's accepted, what's your estimate of when the iterations have to begin?
I would say as soon as you feel comfortable about your knowledge of what existing groundwater levels are, the existing seawater intrusion, as soon as your group feels comfortable about existing conditions, and you start talking to the public and get an idea of what they're interested in, I would say do not start early enough on that, at that point, because there will be there is no penalty for doing it early. I will guarantee you that, okay? No penalty at all. And you really aren't waiting on anything except for your knowledge of the basin and your knowledge of what, in the terms of Sigma, the uses and users of the groundwater. That's the entire public, uses and users, what they want to see. As long as you have knowledge of that, you can start on this process. And it's probably a good idea, because once you go through it once, you have to go through the process of what projects do you have to meet those management criteria. And if those projects don't quite meet those management criteria, you've got to go back and say, maybe we set the wrong management criteria. So I would say don't wait too long on this one.
Can I make a comment from the staff perspective on this? So with respect to the how soon, the staff has gotten together with the consultant and the facilitation staff in the planning kind of work and laid out an iterative process that would begin with the committee that you're gonna propose to appoint tonight, or you're proposing tonight, beginning into January, and laying out that cycle kind of as we talked about for an 18-month kind of cycle. And there are at least 3 iterations in there of working through these kinds of minimum thresholds, measurable objectives, representative monitoring wells, projects to solve the problems, et cetera. So we think it's doable to work in that time frame, and we have a plan for transitioning between now and then to build the knowledge base among the public as well as the committee in between now and the end of the year that would get us ready to launch into that early in the year.
David?
So in setting things like minimum thresholds or undesirable results, it's going to be about the exercise of discretion by this body.
Yes, it will be. These are policy decisions.
Right.
Yes.
So what's built in terms of boundaries on the exercise of discretion?
Reasonableness. Effectively, DWR is going to look at that. If it looks reasonable that what you have decided in their gut effectively says sustainable, then they will approve it as long as it meets the needs of the local users and users. As example, and you don't have land subsidence in this basin. I'm going to use it as an example there. If you came in and said, we think it is sustainable to have 6 inches of land subsidence every year, DWR is going to say no. That doesn't meet the straight face test there. But if you came in and you said, we are going to, I'm going to make this up, it's probably going to be an extremely expensive one, so you aren't going to go there. But if we're going to inject water all along the coast to keep seawater out, and because we're injecting water along the coast, we're going to allow our wells inland to drop 400 feet below ground surface and come back up, and we'll never get seawater intrusion because of that. DWR would say, yeah, that's true. You aren't going to get seawater intrusion. You can let your water levels drop to 400 feet below ground surface and level out, and that would be sustainable for 50 years at 400 feet below ground surface.
But just based on that one criteria, not on other.
You have to have all 6 criteria together, but if they add up into a place where it's a system that you could maintain for 50 years, you have to reach that sustainability within 20, and you have to maintain it for 50, basically. And if DWR says, yeah, the system they have set up, they will be able to maintain that for 50 years, you have quite a bit of leeway there.
So you talk about DWR as if it's some entity that doesn't have faces, but there are faces there.
Yes.
Do we know anything about the process for the evaluation of the groundwater sustainability plans? Is it going to be committee? Is it going to be individuals or multiple individuals? Because that might help us with what, what makes, what would pass the straight face test.
I'm going to answer your question and make an observation here. They are developing that process now. They're developing that process as they review the alternative submittals that were submitted this year. They have gone through them. They got 21 alternative submittals, and at the meeting I was with them maybe a month ago. They said they were only 50% of the way through the review process because it turned out to be so difficult for them.
So the alternative submittal is something other than the groundwater
The
sustainability.
alternative submittal is supposed to be a series of documents that an agency might have that can say the stack of these documents together effectively are a groundwater sustainability plan. That's the alternative. It turns out to be very difficult to review them, so they're developing the system right now. They have admitted that it's far more difficult than they thought. That said, what's more important is that there was a meeting in Clovis 2 days ago. 2 days ago, yesterday. It's going fast. Yesterday, Darcy was at it. I was at it. I don't know if anybody else was at it. DWR did say for every basin, they are going to have a point of contact that will come and work with the basin as you're developing it. I suppose Darcy, I think it's Amanda for this basin, isn't it? Did you know that? It's Amanda. Yeah. And so we know now who our point of contact is for this basin. So we will have a person that's working with us regularly to give us advice and to let us know literally whether our approach is meeting the straight faceness.
Anybody else have any questions? Yes, David.
Yeah, so I'm still trying to understand what reasonableness is.
Okay, so there is a phrase.
So let me ask it in this way. Is that based on the notion that there's a degree of uncertainty in the science of modeling and the margins of error?
Actually, that's a different term. Okay? I'm going to go over two terms now that are in the legislation. One is significant and unreasonable. Okay?
Okay.
Your undesirable result has to be a situation that is not significant and unreasonable. And it's up to you to decide what's significant and unreasonable is. Okay? You get a lot of leeway in this. DWR has thrown out a lot of terms that you get to define. One of them is significant and unreasonable. Now there's another term in the, not in the legislation, but in the regulations, and it is substantial, help me with this one, substantial, not completeness, but compliance, thank you. Substantial compliance. And the concept, this was a term that was fought over when they were writing the regulations, because there were a number of groups that did not want this in. But the line is your GSP, your plan, has to substantially comply with the regulations. And what DWR is saying there is what you were referring to before. There is going to be uncertainty. There's going to be unknowns. There are going to be things that you say, we will learn this later on. We have a plan for collecting more data. We have done the best we can with the data we have. We are substantially complying with the regulations, but we can't completely comply with them because we just don't know everything there. So this is the term of substantial compliance. And that's where you account for a lot of your uncertainty.
Well, I'm just curious what kind of guidance the statute gives us in terms of determining that. I mean, I used to practice in front of a judge. They used to say that what's reasonable is what people agree is reasonable, and if not, they come into my courtroom and I tell them.
That actually might be a good example of where you're going. that might not be that far off. That was one of the issues when we were asking about the alternative submittals. These are the plans that DWR is now reviewing now. And everybody wanted to know, what are you looking for? And effectively, the words that came back from them were, we'll know it when we see it. They are going through the regulations and they are saying, did they include this? You have to include everything. So they're making sure you included everything. And then they're saying, did you make a good effort to analyze everything enough? And if what it really comes down to is, if they believe you have a plan that avoids 6 undesirable results, and the 6 undesirable results are reasonable, and that's the key, they're going to let you pass there. But reasonable is in the eyes of the beholder there. I've got to admit, there is no hard line on that one.
Well, and actually, something that was interesting, I was talking with Stephen Stringhorn, one of the people who's kind of helping define all these things at DWR, and one of the things that we were conversing about was, you know, this idea of reasonableness, and not just passing the sniff test, but actually looking at the it from a technical perspective. And I know that they're talking about, you know, comparing neighboring basins that are interconnected to see like what their model says and what our model says for DWR to kind of decide what's reasonable
Right.
based on neighboring basins.
Right.
And the different analysis that the neighboring basins are doing. So there's definitely, you know, it's an iterative process, I think, even in review at DWR.
Because it's, in the end, developing science in the whole notion of managing the basin at all.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly where, and I think they were pretty clear about that yesterday in Clovis, the fact that, you know, we are all in this together.
But some of your questions get to the very point of why this is iterative. You have to say, we believe that this is the right definition of an undesirable result. And then you have to test it. You have to say, what could go wrong with this? You test it and say, boy, you know, this is a good definition of an undesirable result, except for this little corner of Santa Cruz could completely dry out. You might say, we had it wrong, that's not a reasonable definition. We've got to come up with a different definition. So a lot of what the questions you're asking, get to the point of why this is a long process to come up with these.
Okay, John, I think you had a question.
And I was just going to point out too, we may have some help defining what's reasonable with the city of Santa Cruz is familiar with, particularly when we get into looking at stream flow depletion. And the resources agencies may be looking fairly much over our shoulder on how we're defining what's unreasonable effect. We're talking about how much are we allowed to reduce or how much we need to cut in the stream. So it's not going to be entirely our own thing. I think we're going to have some help with that.
You do have to acknowledge existing laws and regulations.
We're now at the 30-minute mark, just to
Yes.
remind everybody. And anybody has any other last-minute questions? Derek, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. Looking at the agenda, move on to item 5.1 under the consent agenda. And I hope everybody's had the chance to read the consent agenda. Anybody have any comments on it?
If I have just small typos, can I just let her know later? Nothing substantive.
Absolutely. Okay, so at this time, we're entertaining a motion. Okay. Second. Moved by Cynthia, seconded by David. We move approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And the chair abstains, so wasn't at the last meeting. Okay, general business, item 6.1, recommendation from the Groundwater Sustainability Plan Advisory Nominating Committee. And wanted to, first of all, having participated, I wanted to open this by thanking staff. They did an incredible job with a huge amount of information in a very short period of time. And I really appreciate Darcy's work in particular and everybody's work on the committee. And I think we all felt that it was very productive. And I want to also thank all the applicants that applied, whether you were successful or not. Very important that everybody that applied is, I believe, welcome to continue to participate and attend all the public meetings and have input. Everybody's input is appreciated. So let's see. You might have a possible opportunity to serve later. You never know. It could be very exhausting. Okay. At this point, I guess, Darcy, is this your item?
Yes.
Okay.
So The board sought applications for the Groundwater Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee. Over the period that we opened up and then reopened the application process, we received 32 applications. People were highly qualified. The nominating committee took very seriously their responsibilities of assessing all of the applications and checking references. They looked at things, constituencies to be represented, the application's professional and community experience, geographical distribution, source of water supply, and demographic diversity. Some of the background information that's attached to the item, I think there's a map that shows where people are located, and there's a few charts that show where water supply comes from, so that it actually represents the basin in a pretty global way. After consideration of all the applicants and reference checking, the committee nominates Kate Anderton as their environmental representative, John Bargetto as the agricultural representative, Rick Pasale as the small water management system representative, Chris Coburn as the institutional representative, Jonathan Lear as one of the at-large representatives, Douglas Lay as the business representative, Kate Kukowski McCarthy as the water utility ratepayer representative, Charlie Bruce, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You did.
Is an at-large representative, and Ned Spencer as another at-large representative. So they made 9 recommendations from the applications. Although they had originally planned on just 8, there were so many well-qualified applicants, it was very difficult to cut it down. They also nominated, and each agency individually nominated their representative from the NGA board. Marco Romanini, I'm sorry.
I'm just going to point out that the to be designated is
Yes,
now.
I know the answer to that
Okay.
now, so I was going to read that into the record. So Marco Romanini was nominated by the Central Water District. David Green-Baskin was nominated by the City of Santa Cruz. John Leopold was nominated by the County of Santa Cruz. Bruce Jaffe was nominated by Soquel Creek Water District, and John Kennedy was nominated by the private well representatives to the MGA board. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to
Yeah, and at
answer.
this point, if the board has any questions for Darcy, feel free. Okay, and if we see none, then we're going to open this up for public comment. Would anybody like to address the board? Becky?
Thank you. At the last meeting, there was considerable discussion about whether these applications would be considered anonymously if the names were blocked off. So I think, I remember that was going to be left to the discretion of the nominating committee. And I'd like some feedback on if the applications were initially considered under anonymous circumstances. I also wonder...
Can I answer that right now?
You know what?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we're not supposed to have
I'm sorry.
conversations.
Yeah.
Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you. I wonder if the nominating committee has considered having alternates, because it is such a huge commitment and a long commitment, if they were open to reconsidering alternates. And I wonder if if the meetings that will ensue will be public meetings, and how members of the public can get on those notification lists. And finally, I did notice that there is one nominee that lives outside of the Mid-County Groundwater Basin boundaries, so I have a little question about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Anybody else like to speak? Okay. If not, we'll close the public portion and entertain a motion or comment, discussion.
Well, I would just like to say it was really a pleasure to serve on this committee. People put a lot of time and effort and thought into it. The applications were very impressive. It was a hard decision to narrow the field. And if you look at the map and the range of attributes, we tried to have broad professional background, community background, and geographic distribution, and who you got the water from, all of those things represented. So It was really a pleasure. It was hard work, it was a pleasure. So with that, I would like to move the recommendation of the committee.
Okay.
One second. And I want to thank all the committee members and the applicants as well.
Thank you, Tom. Very discussion. Okay. Been moved and seconded that we approve staff recommendation and the committee's recommendation as proposed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. You need that restated? Okay, great. Okay, moving on. Item 6.2. Oh, excuse me,
Is it
Jim.
appropriate to recognize those members that are in the audience now?
Sure, absolutely. Anybody who's here that was selected, please stand up. Thank you. Excuse me, Dana, why don't you start it off? Introduce yourself and say where you're from.
My name is Dana McCarthy. I live over in Central Valley Water District right off of Freedom Boulevard, and I work as a professional geologist doing environmental consulting, and I'm just excited to work with a great team of people. So looking forward to it.
Thank you.
I'm Kate Anderson. I live off of Redwood Drive, one of the Redwood Drives in Syracuse County, but it's off of Glen Canyon and back up on the hills. And I recently drilled a new well and have my own water system on my property and meet with those new staff.
Thank you.
I'm Charlie Roos. I live pretty much across the street, and I've worked as a geologist and a civil engineer. And thank you for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to it. Pretty impressive group of people applying and on the.
Mark Romanini, I'm a board member on Central Water District. I'm an engineer, software engineer.
Jonathan Lear, I'm the senior hydrogeologist at the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, and I spent some time working with Brian at Pajaro. I'm pretty familiar with some of these areas. Oh, and I live in Seabright.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Thank you for being
I'm sorry, Doug Lay. Currently living in the city of Santa Cruz. A year ago, I was in the city of Capitola, and the business I'm with owns property in the groundwater basin. And I think I'm the business representative. So.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, thanks.
John.
I'd just like to point out that these meetings will be public meetings of the advisory committee. They will be advertised. The folks that are on our distribution list will be able to know about them, and we would encourage any of the other applicants who weren't selected to continue to participate actively and be engaged in the process. So
it's going to be a real marathon.
It is.
And I actually promised all the applicants in the email that I sent to them that I would, once the schedule's set for the meetings, that I would inform them of that schedule.
Thank you, Darcy.
And I might add also, we did very specifically discuss the issue of alternates and decided to not include that, but there was a discussion.
Thank you.
And I am the last member of that committee who was present. City of Santa Cruz Water Commissioner, and just had the pleasure of doing the year-and-a-half water supply advisory process for the city, so it'll be fun to engage in this too.
Okay, we're going to move to item 6.2, which is a resolution. It's a recommendation to approve a resolution on a grant application to the 2017 Sustainable Groundwater Planning Grant Program. Because it's a resolution, a motion on this item will require a roll call vote. Okay, we have, Tim's not here, right?
I can do the roll call. Oh, you mean this time?
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, no, we're going to present the item, right? So, Tim's not here. Ron, you presenting him?
Well, Darcy and I are presenting together, but I just wanted to let the board know this is kind of a tandem deal in the sense that if you approve 6.2 to pursue the opportunity, then the next item is to let you know about the budget increase and follow that to do the work.
Right.
So, you know,
Well, this is the first item on the agenda, so
yeah.
go ahead and
Sure. Yeah, I can do a quick rundown. Basically, there is funding from Proposition 1 to fund the groundwater sustainability planning effort. We're eligible to apply for a grant of $1.5 million. It's a matching grant. We can actually fund match back to January 1st, 2015, which was when the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act took effect. We probably have pretty easily the 1.5 million in match, so we could get full pot of money that's available from DWR for the critically overdrafted basins. The application that you would be approving is due in November, which is before the next the board meeting. That's why the resolution would need to be approved tonight. So it's really just, do you want us to go after the grant? And if you do, we need to have you make the resolution that's required in the packet. And that's the resolution you'd be approving is what DWR requires us to submit with the application for the $1.5 million match.
Okay. Any questions at this point? Okay.
So how competitive is the grant, the chances of getting it?
I have heard, because there are so many alternate plans put in by other critically overdrafted basins, those basins are not eligible for the funding. So I think it's pretty much a slam dunk if we put together a reasonable application.
We already did the match, and now it's available to buy that number of basins.
Okay. I do have a question if no one else does. Is there a hard date that we can go back to in terms of the matching funds that we've expended? I know it was allowed or provided in July, right?
Yes, the final grant proposal package came out and they changed the date from the later date when the guidelines came out to the earlier date of January 1st, 2015. So we can look back much further than the original proposal solicitation package.
That's important. Thank you very much. Okay. Do we have any comments from the public? Would anybody like to speak? Okay, seeing none. Okay, a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second. Okay. Been moved by Bruce and seconded by Jim to approve the item. All those in favor say aye.
Excuse me, roll call vote.
Excuse me,
So
roll
think
call. I
you're-
said that.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Bruce Jaffe,
Yes.
Tom McHugh,
Yes.
John Bennett,
Aye.
Robert Morani,
Aye.
Zach Friend, absent, and I guess we'll do the alternates last, so to keep track. John Leopold, absent. Cynthia Matthews.
Aye.
David Baskin.
Yes.
Kurt Abramson.
Aye.
Jim Kerr.
Yes.
John Kennedy, absent. Alternates, John Ricker.
Yes.
Robert Schultz.
Yes.
Anyone that I'm missing?
Okay.
Okay.
Motion's carried. Item 6.3, recommendation to approve the budget adjustment for the grant application by the Regional Water Management Foundation. And that's yours, Sean.
Right. So these grants don't write themselves. The Regional Foundation has a plan to do that for us, but I want to be very transparent that the board did not budget for that. It's not in the budget that you adopted, but we realize there's a high probability of paying the grant, so, for a small amount, get a big amount. But I do want to mention that it's not budgeted. However, it's around $20,000 to do the grant. We can look in there exactly what the number is around there. But about $7,000 of that is Darcy's time, which is it's already budgeted in. So that leaves really a remaining $11,000 that we did not explicitly budget, $7,360 to be exact. If we did not get the grant, but we spent those funds, we've come up with a backup plan with our treasurer, Leslie here. We believe we could allocate some of the money that is designated for her to do the treasury work to cover this at the
Okay, thank you. Board have any questions for Ron? Okay. We'll open it up for the public. Any comments? Becky?
Becky Steinbruner, customer of Pure Source Water Company, a small water company. I really question, well, first of all, I understand that Mr. Carson is already being paid by the Mid-County Groundwater Agency. So I'd like to know why it is that it would require an additional, I guess, $13,000 of his time that he's not already being paid for, especially when this grant, as I understand it, is pretty much a given deal. $1.5 million set aside for every MGA that's every groundwater sustainable agency that needs the help. So it's not like it's a real competitive thing. And I'm seeing that this is costing a lot of money overall. And I see the predicament of smaller agencies like Central Water District. The costs will also be passed on to Pure Source. And I really urge this board to rein in as much as possible for the financial survival of some of your smaller agencies that are part of this group, and to save the money for maybe something down the road that you may not know right now, but will need that money for, especially given that Mr. Carson is already on the payroll. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Anybody else like to speak? Okay, close the public portion.
I'm sorry, I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Also in the packet is the proposal from Mr. Carson. Describes a cost share waiver or reduction for disadvantaged communities. Describes the community served by the OGA does not meet the criteria. I think in earlier discussions we established that there are disadvantaged communities in the basin. Do you have any idea? Can you speak to that?
Well, I know Tim has a lot of experience with that, the grant writing and what we refer to as DACs, disadvantaged communities. So I would refer to him to have made the appropriate judgment there. I know there are small, John, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked a lot with Tim and with the state on the whole disadvantaged community issue. And for our region, we have disadvantaged neighborhoods, but we don't have disadvantaged communities. The term disadvantaged community is really based on a distinct community, a census block, census tract. We don't have an entity that is a disadvantaged community. We have pieces of disadvantaged neighborhoods within our water agency. The City of Santa Cruz, SoCal Water District, do have some neighborhoods, some census tracts that meet the qualifications as disadvantaged, but that does not qualify us to apply as a disadvantaged community because they're just a small piece of a much larger community.
So there is a specific designation requirement.
Right.
A community as opposed to a census tract.
Right. For example, within the county of Santa Cruz, we have two disadvantaged communities, the city of Watsonville and the town of Davenport, which are distinct communities that overall, if you look at the median income in that whole community, and that meets the criteria for being considered disadvantaged.
I'll move approval.
Okay, then move to second. Any comments or discussion?
First, Tom looking second.
Cynthia second. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Item 6.4, recommendation to approve contract with Hydrometrics Water Resources, Inc. and Kearns and West for technical and process support for the Santa Cruz Mid-County Basin Groundwater Sustainability Plan. Rosemary, this is your item. Thank you.
So at the last meeting, we brought you a draft scope of work for hydrometrics and a recommendation regarding, to Cruz and West and negotiating the scope of work for Cruz and West to support, do process support, facilitation, and process support for the Groundwater Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee that you've just created. And in this item, we have created those contracts for your consideration, as well as sort of laid out a little bit of background about why are we doing this committee, what do we hope to accomplish, why are the resources that we're proposing the needed pieces to help us accomplish that. And I wanted to just kind of quick run through those before I turn back to you for your consideration. I think that the overall goal, recognizing the issues in this basin and the complexity of the water utilities and the private well interests and the upland and the near coast, et cetera, there are a lot of issues that require us to build a lot of agreement and understanding in the community as we go forward in developing this plan. And the goal of all of that is to, at the end of it, have a plan that's implementable, that has the community support that we would like to have in order to, and that need to have in order to actually get on with doing projects to protect this basin and to bring it back to sustainability. During the Groundwater Sustainability Agency Formation Committee work, there was a strategy that was developed that looked at using a kind of a hybrid board, broader community advisory board as a way to extend the reach of the people engaged in this process. And that's what the advisory committee that you've just created does. And what we're proposing here are the support resources for the development of the plan, both the technical side and the process and facilitation support resources that are necessary to support that group to achieve the goals that you've established. I think in the interest of time, I won't go into further detail. I think there was a fairly long staff report. There was the contracts are there with the scopes, and I'd be happy to take any questions. But before I do that, I want to just mention that Eric Consulate from Cruz and West is here, and Eric, maybe you should just stand up and say a couple of things, and also Derek Williams from Hydrometrics is here, and those both obviously key folks from this process who will be engaged with us through these contracts.
Welcome.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. So I'm Eric Consley. I'm a principal at Cruz and West. I've been there for 9 years, and I've been studying and designing and facilitating multi-stakeholder collaborative processes for over 20 years. I've studied them for my dissertation, and I've been serving as a practitioner since then. And so it's very pleased to be able to at least have had a good proposal that was selected to be able to support you guys. Happy to answer any questions about me and my firm. One of my colleagues, Mike Hardy, was in the process that perhaps Derek was involved with early on for the California Water Foundation that actually led to the development of the signal legislation in the first place. And so he's on our team as well, bringing a lot of expertise with regard to the act itself and the stakeholder collaboration requirements to support it. So, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Eric. Anybody have any questions for? Okay. And then, Derek, did you want to?
I think most members know me. Thank you very much. Just wanted to say, I'm gonna second what Eric said. He made a great hire with Cruz and West. We've worked with them before on other Sigma projects. I've known Mike Hardy and Anna West for some time. They really are some of the best. And I think the way that Rosemary came up with the scope of work and worked on how to save costs, have your own staff do what they can, and use our staff when necessary was a very well thought out approach to manage the costs as well as possible. So I'll see with that.
Thank you. We'll open the public comment section. Becky?
Thank you. Becky Steinbruder. Thank you. It's nice to meet you, Cruz and West. My question was, were there any local facilitators that were considered? Because I think it's important that people enter in with sort of an understanding of the local politics, and that could help get things off on a good foot rather quickly. Not that it's I'm not saying anything negative, but I just want to know if local people, I'm all about supporting local people, local jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Bring back to the board, close the public portion. Cynthia?
Well, I'm very pleased. I know it's a big ticket, but providing adequate technical support and process support for this. So we've been through the WASAC process in Santa Cruz. We know that those two parts have to be adequately covered. And I think the end result of that is was so impressive. And it goes without saying, this is not a hypothetical exercise we're engaged in. So we want to do it thoroughly and well, and I think this will help get us there. So I'm going to move the recommendation on this.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Motions 1 and 2.
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay. John? go ahead.
Sorry, first, I need those to be, sorry, first Cynthia Matthews.
First, Cynthia Matthews, then Tom Nelson, discussion. John?
Derek, I'm kind of new with this contingency. The contingency fee, $100,000 seems a bit high, I think. And if you don't use the contingency, do we get that back?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You only get billed for the hours. If we don't use even the regular part of the budget, you get it back. We only bill you for the hours we actually spend there.
It shows grand total.
Right, the grand total.
Grand
total.
That's what it is, a grand total.
Right,
And so it shows the 100 in the grand total.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you do get that back. It's one of the reasons it's there is a lot of question of, first of all, nobody's developed one of these plans before. It's still an unknown to us. But also, there were a lot of assumptions, as I mentioned. Rosemary did a lot of work making assumptions, thinking, where can internal staff do work? How much outside work or outside assistance are you going to actually need? The contingency is in there basically as an admission that we had to put a lot of assumptions in here. If we don't spend any of that time, you don't spend any of that money. That's not a...
That's 20%. That's
Mhm.
pretty
Yeah.
hefty.
Yeah.
And then it says here, you did a separate line item for shall provide compensation, hydrometric water resources in the amount of blah, blah, blah. That's the wrong, I got the wrong page here. Let me go. This leaves an additional 12 advisory committee meetings that we have budgeted as a separate line item. And then down below it says additional staff can attend either the advisory committee or board of directors meetings if necessary for an additional cost.
Right.
So would that come out of the?
We can take that out of the contingency, absolutely.
It's
Absolutely,
already
yes.
there.
Yes.
I'd like to just second what Derek said about, it's actually staff's idea to put the contingencies in place in both of these contracts. Really, there are a lot of uncertainties about the numbers of meetings that we'll need to have, whether or not we'll need an extra model run that might have to happen, that as the process evolves. There are a lot of unknowns. We've done the best job we can under the circumstances, and we've tried very hard to build a process where we, have a rough game plan of how we'll roll out, at least as starting from where we are today. But we know that's going to evolve, because even though a year and a half sort of seems like a long time, it's not really a very long time given everything we have to do, and we want to make sure that we have the flexibility. The contingencies would not be allocated unless the executive team staff agrees that those contingencies are going to be necessary. And we certainly can. You're going to be receiving routine reports on the status of the work of the committee, and so we're happy to provide reports of how things are going from a financial perspective as well as another perspective.
So contingency works for both Kearns and West, and I think it's all the same.
Well, there's two different contingencies, right? There's one in their contract, and there's one in the Crimson West one, and there's one in the hydrometrics contract. But they're all under the control of the executive team in terms of making a specific decision that says, yes, you can spend this money, we're going to allocate it this way. They're not just billed against without authorization.
Yes, Jim.
Rosemary, in the very last paragraph, in the very unlikely event these
Yes.
grant funds are not allocated, could you speak a little more about the options to be considered should the grant not be granted?
Right. So we have $264,000 allocated for the technical support and for facility process support in the GSP committee line item section of the budget. And obviously I think we put somewhere in here, we broke it out, maybe it didn't get put in here after all what we spend in this fiscal year, fiscal 18, and then fiscal 19. And so obviously the 264,000 doesn't cover the whole cost, but it would cover a big portion of what needs to be done in fiscal 18, and then we would have a chance to go back in fiscal 19 and adjust. As you heard earlier, I think that the chances of us getting the grant is very high, and with respect to the amount, I'm pretty sure, and I'm just trying to think, because we talked about this a week or so ago, we have more than enough to get the full amount based on the spending we've done. So we will, if we get it, we'll get the full $1.5 million, which would allow us to cover the full cost of these activities we've outlined here, plus additional work that's going on, the modeling work and some other things that are continuing to go on.
And if we don't get the grant, there's enough money in the budget to pay for this by the end of this year?
Well, we probably will have to have a budget adjustment, but probably not immediately, and we'll know more about what's going on with that in the spring, say.
Legally, can we sign a contract or if we have no visible means of repaying?
Why not?
But you did. But you're suggesting.
Is that making you nervous, Leslie?
I'm risk averse, so.
And I'm thinking in this what could possibly go wrong scenario.
Yeah.
Rosemary, I have a question.
Yes.
In your mind, is this NTE or not to exceed contract?
You know, I think we all have the intention that that's the case, but I do think, as we said, and we said this before, and I think it's been clear from some of the things that Derek has said, we're making this up, and there's no template that we can go from, and yes, we're going to try to manage it very carefully, but I don't believe we can hold the consultants to, you have to deliver this for this amount.
Derek, in your mind, is this an NTE contract?
I would be a fool not to agree with Rosemary on this one. I am not going to be a fool, let me put it that way, okay? I wouldn't say we're making this up. That might be a little too broad, but this is a type of job that nobody has done before, so it is a difficult one.
Sounds like a design-build situation.
So along those lines, yeah.
So, great uncertainty in what's going to be required for hydrometrics. Is there also great uncertainty for the facilitation, or does that depend on how the group dynamics, or is it the same no matter whether the group is dynamics are good or bad, or is that scalable, or is that pretty much this is what it takes?
Want to go first?
I'll go first. Well, because we have looked at this at the state level and at other places, because we've been asked before in smaller basins, is there a big discount for smaller basins? And the answer is no, because a lot of the cost of these, because of the way you have to make iterative decisions, a lot of the cost of these plans is based on how many meetings you have to have, how much, and for every meeting you need more and more scientific backup. So for both of these contracts, a lot of the cost of them is going to depend on the number of meetings that comes out in the future. And we don't know how many that will be until we get into the contract itself, see where we're able to get agreement early and see where we have to have many meetings. That's why there's no big scale dependence on these GSPs, like scale of the basin, because even in small basins, they fight very hard for their water there. And so they end up having lots and lots of meetings there also. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the facilitation. I'm less familiar with that.
Yes, so I two parts to my answer, and that was one of them, is that our budget is very much based upon how many meetings are being assumed for the process. And for instance, and so it's assumed that the GSP Advisory Committee will be meeting monthly, and we're assuming that there will be 6 work group meetings that they will say we need to get a subset of that advisory committee who will gather together in between 2 meetings and do some work and then bring that product back to inform the next meeting. If it so happens that it's determined that, wow, we have way more work that needs to be done in between these meetings and they need to be facilitated, that would just be an increased number of meetings that wasn't anticipated at the beginning that we would need to, if you wanted to facilitate. I think the choice for the board would be, well, we're going to do those and not have them facilitated, and then you risk those. Yeah, but to the extent that you want to bring us in to do it, then those are unaccountable meetings. The second thing that I think is actually really helpful to ponder is that this is an agreement-focused process. So we're not just inviting this GSP Advisory Committee to come together and share their individual opinions, and then they go home at the end of the day. We're asking them to brainstorm and to do joint problem solving together and to come together, ideally, to strongly be able to support recommendations to the board about what should be in the plan. And that, I think, gets to the heart of what Rosemary said earlier about producing a plan that has broad support. If it can be broadly supported by the diversity of people you have in your advisory committee, that's a big step towards ensuring that you're also having broad support by members of the public. And certainly we want to be involving the public at each step along the way. So facilitating an agreement-focused process is more time-consuming, certainly, than showing up and just receiving input in an ad hoc fashion or one-off from members. And so I think part of the contingency, my understanding, for us is to just account for we don't know how much work may be involved for us in between meetings, working with individual members or working with groups, trying to find out where are these areas of agreement and how can we sort of move in between meetings towards finding them.
Thank you. Thank you. John?
Is there any doubt that we won't make the deadline?
I have no doubt you're going to make the deadline. I have no doubt you're going to make the deadline. One reason I say that is you're actually farther ahead than any other groups I'm talking to, and you're actually going down the right line. There's a few groups that have started down the wrong path already. So I actually have no doubt you are going to make the deadline. Yeah. I am not saying it's going to be easy. There are a lot of difficult decisions to make, but this is a committed group, and I think you are going to make it. Yeah.
We have a model, do we do a model thing in 14 and we have some answers back on that by 16 and have you seen everything from that model?
I'm not sure what the question is there.
We'll talk about the model in the next agenda item.
I think that's on the next agenda.
Right.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? Okay.
Do you want me to repeat the motion that was made?
I'm sorry.
Do you want me to repeat the motion? Or do you? So we had Cynthia first, second Tom.
Can we restate the motion?
So it was to move the recommendation before us, both motions 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you. Lost all the discussion. Bring it back. We're ready to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye, please. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. discussion? Okay, we're going to move on to item 6.5, groundwater model update from hydrometrics. A recommendation to approve hydrometrics water resources scope of work and budget for the fiscal year 2017 and 18. Ron?
Right, I'll take this, and Derek may also chime in at some point. So basically, this scope of work includes evaluating the global climate models, incorporating the SkyTeam data. We continue to work with the folks from Denmark on that. Running various pumping simulations, incorporating the climate projections into that, and then doing an evaluation of uncertainty and producing a final report. So the total estimated budget is about $218,000. It's outlined in the scope here. I think a large portion of that, around 150, is work that actually wasn't initially scoped, and like we didn't know about the SkyTem when we initially looked at the model and some of a lot of the other stuff. I actually have some notes here. Some of the seawater intrusion runs that we're going to be looking at.
Ron, you might want to say what SkyTem is.
Oh, SkyTem is a technology that was brought to us, I don't know, about a year ago from Denmark. It's a geophysical technique, and I don't know if many of y'all remember when a helicopter was offshore towing something big underneath it. And it was a big geophysical tool. And what they did was try to locate the seawater in the aquifer out offshore. We know where it is onshore, but we don't know where that seawater intrusion is offshore. So they have done that. It was a little bit of a gamble. The board took that risk, low risk, big returns, and it turned out it did work. And we've been looking at the draft data, and that data will be incorporated in the model. So when they run the model, they'll be able to kind of say the seawater is out here, seawater intrusion, and so how long will it take to get into the wells? So that's SkyTem, submitted by the SkyTem data. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. There's two parts to this. One is to approve the not to exceed budget and associated scope of work, which is in attachment 1. And then also authorize the general manager of Circle Creek, because there's a business component of this, to finalize the contract agreement and the board president to execute that. And it does ask for if there's any fine tuning that needs to be done to the professional agreement, because this is the first one we're doing under this organization to allow that to happen, but it's attached here also.
Okay. Comments or questions for Ron? Okay, we'll open it up to the public. Anybody like to address the board on this issue? Becky?
Thank you, Becky Steinbruner. I attend a lot of different meetings because I am passionate about finding a solution for our water problem. And at a recent County Water Advisory Commission meeting, Mr. Cruz from the City of Santa Cruz talked about a different climate change model that has come out. I'm sorry I don't have my notes from that meeting with me, but it's something about Healy stars or something like that. And I went home and researched it, and there have actually been some articles in the Los Angeles Times about it. And at this commission meeting, I asked if that is the same climate change model that Hydrometrics is using. And Mr. Richter, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said it's not. It's a different model than what Hydrometrics is using, and that Hydrometrics may, because of that, the resulting model may produce different results than what would be brought forth if this other model were used. So I would like some discussion about that, and maybe Derek can help with that, but I would just like it considered by your board. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Anybody else in the public like to address the board on this item? Okay. Hearing none, bring it back to the board here, and we'll entertain a motion to approve the discussion. Okay. Good second.
You're moving the staff recommendations for items 1, 2, and 3?
Maybe I didn't hear.
1 and 2.
One and two. Yeah, 1 and 2.
There is no action.
Not 4, 3, 3.
It's not 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 3 to authorize the purchase order.
I withdraw. Okay.
I second.
Well, he withdrew it, so I'll make the motion to move the staff recommendations for items 1, 2, and 3 of the board's action recommendations.
I'll second that.
Bruce is second, okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Well, a little discussion.
Okay.
We may.
Please.
One thing that I do think would be helpful for the public, and I don't know if it's Rosemary or the gentleman from Hydrometrics to address this, but the issue of the modeling and how you're using, because as I read it, some of the stuff that the Hydrometrics is doing in the climate change modeling is going to be similar and track what the city of Santa Cruz is doing as it goes forward, but also have other modeling that you consider sort of as a test so that you make sure that it's not getting too narrow in the analysis. Is that correct?
That I am, the second part I am not familiar with, and I'm not familiar with it because I'm not the lead modeler on this. You are correct on the first part. We are using the global climate change models similar to the ones the city of Santa Cruz are using, so all the analysis in this basin will be based on the same assumptions there. I'm not familiar, maybe Rosemary or Ron, are you familiar with that one? Yeah, the second
Well,
part.
I'll say a couple of things. One, you can see that the models, different climate models produce different results here.
Right.
And there's another approach we're taking, which is what Metropolitan Water District is taking down there in the Orange County area, LA area, which is true data sets from history that might be applicable into the future. But all this is guided by a technical advisory committee. We have a high-level, sophisticated group of people that are advising on the modeling. They get together with the modeling team periodically and help make sure that's going in the right direction. So Andy Fisher, Dr. Fisher, Dr. Bruce Daniels, Barry Heck, Dr. I could go on. But nobody knows exactly what's going on in the future, so we're trying to accomplish the right range and approach.
So I would just add a couple of things also, which is to say that the model that's being developed now has had investments from Santa Cruz and SoCal over a fairly long period of time, and maybe the county's had money put into it. I don't know all the historical details of who's been investing. But each one of the agencies are also planning to use the model for their own kind of assessments of certain aspects of, for us, it will be aquifer storage and recovery and looking at how that kind of groundwater injection or in lieu groundwater banking kind of strategy might help us solve our problem, which is not exactly the same as what the issues are in the basin, but related obviously. So the city, I think in Cameron's memo here that's in this item, there's a discussion of the city's climate change model that was used in the Water Supply Advisory Committee work. That was based on, I think I'm going to get this right now, CalAdapt sort of round 3, which was several years ago. It's
Right, this is all being updated.
California adaptation. There's a website where they've been doing a lot of work on these climate models. One of our hydrologists who actually works for Balance, but it's a different person that is on this technical advisory committee that Ron mentioned, recently said that there's a new version of that, CalAdapt 5, that is, so he's working and we're looking at the possibility of additional view on the climate change. In other words, a new version of climate change that would be different from the one that we had in the WASAC work. And that it's not ready for prime time yet. It's just some information that we're starting to begin the process that will ultimately get woven into our analyses that we're working with this model on a separate sort of scope of work and time.
And the idea being to develop consistency between the different groups.
Well, I'm not sure consistency is absolutely, in fact, it's not necessary or desired necessary, because I think that we don't know enough about what's going to happen in climate in the future. So having a few places that are out here that are kind of like this are not bad. It's not bad from my perspective. And that's, you know, we have what we've done, the catalog thing that Ron talked about. We may end up having this third one. That's not bad, because it helps us really understand the sensitivity of certain modeling assumptions to what we might see in the future, and that's important.
And I might add into that, you know, even if you think you have the perfect global model or whatever, but you're not sure, you may not want to choose that one because of what's at risk here. You may want to go with a little more conservative scenario, rainfall scenario. So there's that, and I think that's pretty much the way it is.
John?
Just a question on the budget. Does this budget include the work that's being done for the city's process and Pure Water Hotel?
No.
So those figures are not in here, but it does include the $70,000 that
Yes.
we're going to be paying for with our grant, which is actually in addition to what's in the MGA budget. That was not in
Yes.
the MGA budget, so that's money that's coming in.
Right, and it's in here, that's all.
Okay.
That's to determine the impact of the
Right.
inland pumping versus.
I think there was some other questions about that regarding the items on the budget. I think 5.3.1 and 5.4, if there was some redundancy there, so just to confirm that. Page 284.
Yeah, you're looking at their proposal here,
Right.
and 5.31 and 5.4.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no.
So that, I think the question was, do we have a number of years that we've already evaluated that or already have that data?
No.
Okay, it's new.
Yeah, and the uncertainty will be very important. There's another climate change scenario, and then the predictive uncertainty analysis. It's done with almost every model, I think.
Derek,
This isn't an exact science.
could you give just an explanation about those two? That's 5.31 and 5.4, which is the simulations of reduced pumping.
Do you want me to turn the lights off? It's really hard to see. Do you want me to turn the lights?
Maybe not all the way out.
Let me try. It's hard for the audience to see.
So if you could bring the
There's
Yeah, 284.
5.3.1 and 5.4.
The 5.3, oh, okay. Yeah, and they're related items here, and these are items that I believe are funded. Is that correct? These are the items that are funded through the county grant?
No.
Is that not? Okay, then I don't know. Oh, this is the additional GCM one. I thought this was different. Yeah, okay, so this is looking at runs that were done earlier regarding reduced pumping within the city. And the predictive uncertainty, I've got to look through this and figure out which items go where here. The predictive uncertainty, the idea there is to say, this is what we're predicting happens in the future. What if some of our assumptions, not just about the pumping, but assumptions within the model are slightly wrong? What if the hydraulic conductivity is slightly wrong? What if our boundary condition is slightly wrong? What does that mean about the range of possibilities of what might happen in the future? So what we're talking about doing there is not just coming back and saying, this is what's going to happen in the future. But we're going to be coming back and saying, this is the most likely thing we're going to see in the future. But this is the range that you might want to be worried about. This is the likely range of what could happen. At the same time, identifying this might be the most likely. This gives you a little more, a little better feel for not just giving you a number, but a little better feel for what the range of things might happen in the future there. That's the 5.4 there.
And Derek,
yes.
Let me give you this section of, it's on page 282. It's the paragraph right below the table here. that describes what the other GCM is?
Yeah, the other GCM, I take it that's the Andy Fisher GCM.
Well, it's the
GCM?
Desert Research Institute.
Oh, the Desert Research one's the other GCM?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know which one was going to be considered the other GCM. This is, who is it, Justin at the Desert Research Institute?
Justin.
Yeah, Justin at the Desert Research Institute, who is downscaling one of the GCMs for us to have an additional model, basically, an additional climate change model that we can import into your model. So that's going on right now, actually. Justin is downscaling one of these global models to say what's going to happen locally under this situation. And then we can use that local climate model to say what might happen under different public scenarios. And that's what this one's about there. And Justin's doing that now, I believe. Yeah.
Ron?
Okay, so to bring this back.
This is a lot of money, but I don't think that it's unwarranted. The fact that there's a TAC involved with this gives me confidence that it's being directed. And it's not just, pardon this, Derek, the consultant saying we want to do more so we can make more money. The other thing that I think this plays into is when DWR looks at what we're doing, the more we can show that we have a level of sophistication in our analysis where we consider sensitivity to our models. That type of thing, I think, will help us in terms of getting a favorable evaluation on our plan. So I'm supportive of it.
Okay, well, there's no other discussion. It's been moved and seconded. We'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Nobody's opposed. Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Derek. Sure. Okay. Move on to item 6.6, recommendation on audio recording. And Ron, this is yours as well.
Yeah, so the board asked us to look at options to record some of these meetings all audio. And so we went through the process of seeing what was out there to do that. I explained that in the memo. So Kelly's had a fair amount of experience with this, from buying an inexpensive device that didn't work too well trying to set it to spending $1,000 per meeting to have Legends theatrical recorded. What we landed on is a suggestion that one of the Central Water District's board members actually suggested to us. Thank you, Marco, for that, which was what we're recommending is about $1,000 system if you purchase. And there's a picture of it here in the memo. But the reviews we ran, the analysis we did, it looks like it'll perform, and there's a chance it won't. If it doesn't, it's less expensive than $1,000 per audio recording. So that is our recommendation. I do note in there that at times, like for the learning sessions, that we'll call them, learning sessions where it's important, we might want to really, the public might be interested in some of these kind of, the hydrology 101 of Santa Cruz, or something that's not going to change with time that people may want to watch. We could bring in community television for that sort of thing, and that'd be about, I don't know, it depends on the week, the time, $700-800 a pop. But thinking that combo might serve what the board was looking for. Or it's your choice not to do it at all, too. We don't really recommend it, we give you options.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Questions, discussion? Anybody? Okay, members of the public, would anybody like to comment? Becky?
What a surprise. I want to thank you very much for considering this as an agenda item and for putting some money forward to it, because I think it's critical for transparency And also just to help with, this is going to be a long process, and I think it will really help be a great resource for your GSP committee and also your board. And I want to thank Bruce Tanner, who donates a lot of his time. I do pay him some, but it's nothing what he should get. And I hope that it's been a bit of a disappointment that it hasn't been able to be linked up with the website, but it is available on YouTube for the public. And again, I'm really glad that you're going to take a step forward and record these sessions in the future. And would encourage that all of the sessions, including the GSP meetings, are recorded. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I second what Becky was saying, and also I think it would be a great time for us to see how well it really does work, and if it does work well, to invest more money into it to make it available to everybody, and even maybe on a higher plane, to where we might have our own equipment of some sort that we aren't talking about right now, as far as cameras and things like that, so that we don't have to depend on somebody else coming in to do it, that we would be able to do it ourselves, which makes it a lot less expensive, and that's all.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, close the public portion, bring it back. Entertain a motion or discussion.
Move the staff recommendation.
Second. Okay.
First, David Dawson, second.
Okay, any discussion?
Jim Kerr,
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Just by way of discussion, I was just mentioning that, you know, I had asked that we consider this, and I really do appreciate everybody getting behind it. I hope that when we post the links on the website, to the extent that there have been presentations, that we'll have the presentation materials available by links, so people can, you know, make it easy for them to watch the presentation and listen to the audio at the same time, because we're not going to do video recording all of these sessions. But I think it'll be a positive thing, and I hope it helps our staff in terms of making our minutes a little bit easier to do.
Yeah, thank you. That's very complicated. Thank you. Okay, the second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No, it's carried unanimously. Okay. Item 6.7, recommendation to accept draft communication and engagement plan. Darcy, you're on.
Okay, the communication and outreach team put together, and it's a staff team, put together the draft communication and engagement plan, which is attached. We basically put it together from the feedback that we've been getting from the community in both these meetings and the drop-in sessions. What we're trying to do is focus the NGA messaging that goes out to the public around the things that we really want people, whether they're keeping a close eye on what we're doing or just kind of staying in touch to hear consistent messaging. Also trying to identify how the NGA can best communicate with our core audience, which is outlined in what we consider an action plan. And then to evaluate the results of our outreach to guide us to spend the outreach budget most effectively on communicating these focused messages. We had prepared this over some time. We've been kind of operating under this plan for a while. The State Department of Water Resources came out with guidance finally in June. We reformatted our plan, which actually didn't take very much effort because I guess we were on the right track and what DWR was looking for. And I think we're in reasonably good shape. It's been reviewed by staff. We're open to the idea of either accepting it as it is or taking direction from the board and improving it, but continuing to work on the plan. And of course, the evaluation process is something that would be ongoing.
Great. Tom?
Yeah, just, that was the one I had a question about. So how will we know if it's working? Like what actually, we have a baseline and what are we going to do?
Well, one of the things that we've been doing regularly when we either have public meetings is, of course, we're looking at attendance and we're asking people when they come how they've heard about it. We're having conversations with people before and after and sometimes during the meetings about what their questions are and trying to make sure they're understanding like where our water comes from, you know, the fact that basically what we're using is groundwater inside the Lake County Basin. And I think, we're seeing that message is, people are understanding that when they're coming to our meetings.
I believe that beyond that.
Well, I think that's really our touch point, is the conversations that we're able to have.
And we do have Google Analytics on the website, so I can track over time how many people are coming, if it's the same people or new people. So we can see if that number increases as our outreach efforts increase.
So no survey, even simplified.
Well, we actually have a survey for our private well owners, and I could imagine that might be developed if we see it as a useful tool. And I think Sierra probably knows more about the private well owners.
Yeah, and I can talk about this. I'm not sure if now's the time, but so this is the brochure that went out to all the private well owners, and there might still be some available at the front. I can't wait to the table, but
I think I have them all.
Okay.
Oh, no, they're there too.
Yeah. So this was mailed to all the private well owners about 4 weeks ago. Hopefully some of you private well owners should have gotten one. It's not just private wells, it's anybody who's not the recipient of municipal water. So it's the small water systems as well. So since we sent that out, we've already had 43 responses to the survey, which is pretty good. We sent out 2,646 of those brochures. We have another several hundred left to give out at meetings. But 43 responses to a survey is actually, I think, quite impressive. And they've been thoughtful responses too, for the most part. I will probably wait a couple more months before we really analyze everything and make sure people have a chance to look through it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, David.
One thing I was curious about, I'm looking at the engagement plan, and the first sentence says Santa Cruz County's main drinking water supply is groundwater. Now, maybe I missed something, but I thought the San Lorenzo River was Santa Cruz County's main drinking water supply. and groundwater is the main drinking water supply within this agency's boundaries.
Well, groundwater is the majority.
Yeah.
Everywhere but the city uses groundwater.
They don't use the San Lorenzo up in the river, up in the valley?
Well, they use some of the tributaries, but they use about half of theirs is surface water, and the other half is groundwater.
The heart of the valley is what, if you're talking residential, then.
City of Watsonville's groundwater, small water systems are groundwater, Scotts Valley's groundwater.
Yeah, I would be more comfortable saying one of Santa Cruz County's main drinking water supplies is groundwater, because it's not as though it's, this overwhelming thing where we have groundwater and very little of anything else. But that's just my 2 cents.
The facts are the facts.
Yeah.
No one else can attack that.
But wait, if it's drinking water, that's not ag. That's residential users.
So I think even with those, it still was,
Yeah.
it's still the predominant drinking water supply is groundwater throughout the entire, if you look at the entire county.
So the Santa Cruz's service area is about 96,000, and if you figure that the county is about, 265,000 or something like that?
But it's not like it's 90-10.
No.
Well, seriously,
I mean, you can change it.
Right.
Try to tweak the language a little bit. That's what it is.
Well, and
Good comment.
and the possible board actions was either accept it the way it is or provide staff with direction to make minor changes.
Well, I would like to see that minor change.
Perfect. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Because I think feedback is a wonderful thing.
Go ahead. That was actually my
Go ahead.
The rest of it I didn't think was going to matter, but I know that, frankly, if you're in the city of Santa Cruz and you read that and you're saying, oh, that's not where my water comes from, why am I even playing this game?
And if you're someone besides the city of Santa Cruz, I think it's a true statement.
If there's someone who wants our excess water.
Well, I just think that our water supply is pretty diverse, and it's not as though it's not as though it's a 90-10 situation.
The majority of our drinking water supply. How about that?
Yeah, the majority of our drinking water supply is. But we actually have a few main supplies that part of our goal over time is to integrate their use better across the county so that we all have a sufficient water supply.
David, do you have any other changes or questions?
No, that's it.
Okay, perfect.
I
Good with that?
I want to acknowledge that this is a good effort, but I also want to acknowledge that there's no limit to what can be done here. But there's a limit to staff time. And so I would encourage every to the extent possible to involve students, interns, et cetera, and in the communication engagement.
I'll add that, like our students here are leading this effort of outreach is supported by Santa Cruz's department to do it, by our people too, so they have some resources to work with. So we're all pitching on the same.
We can't do too much, though.
Well, I agree with that, and I actually had quite a few ideas, which I wouldn't take anyone's time, but if there is a group that's brainstorming on this, I saw lots of opportunities to do more without expense. So I'm happy to plug in to that appropriate place. And I also want to say there's still two of the new advisory committee members here. To my mind, this is a really important role for them, is to, as they invest their own time and expertise heavily in this process, to be going back to the constituencies in which they have strength and be a vehicle for information back out to their many communities. That fits into the whole process of having a well-understood plan when it comes to Bernadette and Light action. So I think this is on all of us to think, well, what service could I be promoting this knowledge to all of us and all of the advisory committees?
Any other comments? Okay, we'll open it up to the public now. Becky?
Thank you. I really like the signs that are out on the road. I think they probably get a lot of attention. I would like to suggest that the logo be made smaller, maybe on the overall percent of the sign, so that the amount of information in terms of the meeting date and maybe the purpose or the focus is more easily read by passing motorists. But I think the signs are great. And is this an appropriate time to talk about the submittal of written correspondence? Or is that not?
No, that would be
okay, all right. I have thoughts on that, but I'll write it to you.
Thank
The
you.
signs are great.
Thanks for the compliment.
Yeah.
So we saw one in Atlas Village today. A surprise. So thank you. Okay, no one else from the public, we'll bring it back to the board. Okay, Cynthia moves approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Jim. Moved by Cynthia, seconded by Jim. All those in favor, any further discussion?
Well, I'm assuming that by accepting the plan, that it's going to be tweaked over time as it goes forward, and you'll play with little language things as necessary.
So,
Living plan.
Okay. A living plan.
Yeah. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Okay. Item 6.8, recommendation to approve a resolution to join a JPA with Aqua. And I think this is Ralph's item.
Actually, you want to take? Sure, I can. So we need liability insurance coverage, and before you is in this memo is Resolution 1702 that just breaks down a 3-year cost. We're affiliate members, so it's pretty much a no-brainer. I mean, it's liability insurance, and there's not much options for us out there to move forward. So the motion is for you to approve the Joint Powers Insurance Authority. It's also with the Association of California Water Agencies. It's a liability program. One thing I'd like to note, what's also nice is Aqua JPI puts on at least once or twice a year a conference. Every other year it's in Monterey, and because we'll be all members of that, you'll be able to attend those. And in the last few years, there's some great forums on sustainability, and as we move forward with what we're going to be doing, I think there's going to be a lot more, and we will be able to attend the NGA board. Any questions?
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? David?
Yeah. Does this also include insurance of the nature of directors and officers insurance so that it covers all the people on the board?
It does.
And that's why it's important.
And two of the agencies that are here, Dave, two of the agencies that are here already have this insurance for SoCal Creek and Central Water, already have coverage with Aqua DPIA. We've been very satisfied over the years with that.
The membership of Aqua is a bonus. Great information. So, okay, any other discussion about the item? Members of the public, anybody want to comment? Yes.
Martin Mills from Pure Source Water. We're a small private water company in Aptos. And I just wanted to ask if you looked into California Rural Water Association, CRWA, also has their own insurance, URIS. I forget what it stands for, but CRWA's URIS program provides insurance to small water companies. And I don't know if public agencies as well, but I know that they do have this insurance program. We get our insurance through them. And if you want to shop around, you said that there were limited choices available, that might be another option for you.
Thank you. Okay, bring back to the board.
Make a motion.
I will approve. Okay. It's been moved by Tom and seconded by Cynthia. Any further discussion, comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
It's a resolution.
Roll call, excuse me, roll call, you're right. Thank you, Rob.
Bruce Jockey.
Yes.
Tom LePew. John Bennett.
Aye.
Robert Morani.
Yes.
Zach Friend, absent. John Leopold, absent. Cynthia Matthews.
Aye.
David Baskin.
Yes.
Kurt Abramson. Jim Kerr.
Yes.
John Kennedy, absent. Alternates, John Ricker.
Yes.
Robert Schultz.
Yes.
Okay, we're on to item 7, informational updates from directors and staff, 7.1 Treasurer's report for the period ending August 31.
So this is the first treasurer's report for this fiscal year. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I'd also like to share that the MGA will be undergoing their first audit. The auditors will be on site the first week of October, and we have already provided them the documentation they requested as it pertains to the MGA.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Okay, outreach reports, 7.2.
So I don't know that there's anything to add that we haven't already discussed. We have the outreach strategy, and you've seen the brochures that we sent out. We're continuing to work on, we do have a new handout, an updated version of a handout that we produced a year and a half ago, and it's up on the website now, and we'll have it printed here, but it's a more detailed informational thing for people who are interested in it. And then we're still working on kind of a more overview for people, something easy and accessible and really visually stimulating for people who are maybe less inclined to read a 2-page single font document and more interested in like a graphic that will kind of explain things. So we're still working on that one, but let's look up on the website.
So maybe we could just also make a comment about the plan, the 4 sessions that are planned for the orientation for the committee. Those are going to be not convened committee meetings in particular, they're going to be public sessions. The first one will be Sigma 101 and Groundwater 101 orientation on just basically the basic moving parts of that. The second one will be called the State of the Basin, which will be about the trends and the water quality data, the sort of status of the basin based on all the work that's been going on in the basin over many years. So you saw something, for example, in the biennial report that came out last year that will, that will be some of the information that gets presented. The third one is going to be about groundwater modeling. It will talk about the sort of the inputs to models, the sort of what models do, what the processing inside the models are, what the outputs are, how we're going to be using models in this process. The goal there is to sort of take the, open the black box and let people see what's going on inside the model so that people feel comfortable and confident that the modeling results are really reflective of, the best guess that we can make, given models are models, of what's going on. And then the last one is going to be a more detailed, probably, presentation and discussion of the sustainability indicators, with another opportunity for us talking about how we were going to apply those. One of the things that those of us who are getting a little bit involved in the Santa Margarita groundwater basin kind of came to the conclusion about when we went to their meeting a couple of weeks ago, is that these would be a great opportunity for us to invite some of our other partner agencies or other agencies in the county, Pajaro Valley, the Santa Margarita Basin Groundwater Agency, certainly the other water agencies in the county, to come and also, at least especially to the first one and the last one, which are very general and not specific to our basin, to learn some things that will maybe help them and help kind of create a larger sort of framework of dialogue. So we're working on the scheduling of those, and I think they're gonna get going in just a couple of weeks with the first one, which is Groundwater 101, Sigma 101, and then try to schedule them out so that all 4 of them are completed before the end of the year. So that's going to be happening soon.
Okay, thank you. Cynthia.
I was really excited to hear about this from Rosemary the other day, and I hope we can cast a very wide net in terms of everyone we can think of who might be interested in knowing about this. A good email list. And that reminds me, I'd also mentioned to Rosemary when we spoke earlier, our item 6.3, approving, 6.2, the grant application. And I had asked whether it would be useful to get letters of support, and it may not be functionally helpful since we're in such a strong position, but it occurred to me that it might be politically useful to contact a broad number of the entities that we consider our partners, whether it's Business Council, the Farm Bureau, or anything, Sierra Club, just anyone that's interested in this, and say, we're applying for a planning grant for groundwater sustainability, just a small letter. We'd like a letter of support from your organization. And what that does is let them know that it's happening and that they matter, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, that's, I think, just getting ongoing communication and buy-in from as broad a spectrum as we can. So I don't think that needs action probably, but if you guys think it's worth the effort, I think it's part of the communication picture.
Great. Jim.
Thank you. I really like this idea. That's great for the public as well as the panel members. Will these be facilitated?
They will be facilitated, and the goal is a sort of presentation format and an opportunity for Q&A and a not, more conversational as opposed to, won't be there for 3 or 4 or 5 hours, but they'll be planned to try to provide the information in a very, digestible and accessible way for a whole range of different, people who might be interested. Some have been exposed, some of them might not have been so exposed to the content, and then basically be able to do Q&A.
I think this would be helpful for
also.
Oh, yeah. This is the
the
one that
people
we,
that have been coming to meetings.
Right.
They'll have that advantage.
right. And we did, this was the ones we've talked about doing a videoing of, and or alternatively, if not that, then some kind of a webinar kind of strategy where you'll be able to hear the presentation and see the slides sort of on the, you know, you can go onto a webinar kind of basis. We're exploring what that could look like. But this is a really important foundational element for the committee and for the whole community to get us ready to move forward with the planning process and kind of prime the pump for that. So big effort starting now.
And one other thought, the more we try and do just public outreach, would be to do kind of a cheat list for the acronyms. I mean, my head spins, I don't know them all. I know the basics, but I was reading through the scope of service. I don't know what.
You'll get a second.
Take it on faith.
I hate when they find acronyms.
And so I'll just say I'm on the Metro board, and we have 2 full pages of acronyms. So when you're reading a report, you go, oh, that's what that is.
The education team has their own set.
Yeah. But
And we actually have an acronym list that's up on the website, so I can send you the link to that.
okay, but just
Yeah,
it's the offer.
absolutely.
Right.
If desired. Yeah. Thank you.
Do we have any other reports or comments? Mr. Bennett?
Well, Senator Monty got an idea that he'd like to have all of us add $1 to our water bill. I think it's a bad idea. Central Water, we, in our water board meeting, we voted to send him a letter stating that we didn't think it was a good idea. I'd kind of like to see the MGA write a letter. I'd like to see it, if you're opposed to it, City of Santa Cruz, Soquel Creek, any private water system, to send a letter to Mr. Monty and say we think it's a bad idea. Is that something maybe the board might consider?
I can fill in a little background, at least what Aqua's doing. They agree and disagree. They like the idea of trying to help people who don't have quite as much money. They disagree with the process. They agree with the director Bennett just saying that don't tax the water agencies, but there's other ways to obtain that funding, which they lay out in a letter to. So I just wanted to give you a little background on Aqua's position.
I don't know that it's the mission of the MGA to deal with this issue as much as it might be individual agencies and jurisdictions. That would be my comment. But anyway, anybody else?
Just one quick thing, I just want to thank all the executive staff and Rosemary, I know you had a big piece in just the amount of planning it takes to just get ready to plan. It took a lot just to be able to have those, estimates done and consultants on board and all the work to get people on the committee. So I just feel really good about how we've all worked together and all the work that's gone into, because it's a very important thing and we're right on top of it. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I think the executive staff's done an incredible job. And I hope the members of the public appreciate it as well. And we continue to get people to come to meetings. And the transparency is good. We'll keep it that way. Okay. Any other board member reports? Any other staff reports? Okay. Item number 8, future agenda items. This was placed on the agenda last meeting. I saw from the minutes, and I think we're just going to open it up and ask if anybody, it was per David's request, a great idea. How do you get items on the agenda? There's no report. Anybody have any items they'd like to place on the agenda or consider?
I'm not so sure it's an agenda item as much as I like to, since I think the outreach is so important, I like to have that be a continuing report on how that's going.
And I think maybe somewhat related to that, I mentioned to Rosemary the possibility of just giving us key dates, and I'm thinking mostly of meetings and information sessions, and sometimes in some groups that's done after the agenda, just calendar of upcoming meetings, because there are a lot of things we'd like to know about. I know, so maybe if that could just be included.
Great suggestion. David, do you have any comments?
The only comment I had is that actually the item that was suggested about the Monning's bill is something that could be, that someone could ask if it would be agendized for a future discussion, because it's not something that we're in a position to decide tonight. I mean, I tend to share Rob's point of view in the fact that I don't really think it's particularly appropriate for this entity to deal with it, but that's, but actually you decide that by having something on your agenda and discussing it and deciding whether or not you want to take action if someone wants to make that request. I'm not making the request because I don't want us to do that.
The only thing is that you take all the members we have in the basin, $1 a month, that's a lot of money leaving our basin. And we're struggling to put money into it. So what was the object to have the sustainable groundwater management agencies if they're not going to take care of their business over there? I mean,
And the answer is that if you want us to discuss that, you need to request that it go on the agenda.
well, there wasn't much support for it. We put it on the agenda.
Put it on the agenda.
Put it on the agenda.
Okay.
Agendize the thing.
Any other agenda items anybody wants to put on the agenda? Okay, hearing none. I guess that's the end of that item. Nothing further to do. We're going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Maybe we should put it on